We had the Tez Johnson injury happen this weekend and Marcus Harper. And so there was reporting from Pete Thamel yesterday of ESPN. Pete Thamel's got a mole down in Eugene. He's got somebody giving him the intel.
Yeah, he's got them all over the country. He's the Jeff Passan, the Adam Schefter. That's who he is of college football.
I don't quite put him on that level. I think him, Auerbach, and McMurphy are kind of the same. I don't know if I differentiate those people. I think they all have their sources, but I don't think there's one that is over the others. But he had this one locally.
I'm still pissed at him for the DeCorian Moore story this summer. I don't know if you remember that, but he got leaked that DeCorian Moore, who was the number one wide receiver in the country, was going to commit to Oregon on the 4th of July, and he didn't want to wait for the live announcement, and so he timed a tweet, but he got his time zones wrong, and so he sent out the tweet before the kid committed, and he totally stole the thunder from the kid.
Oregon receiver, this is from Pete Thamel. Tez Johnson's shoulder injury is not considered season-ending, and he's expected to be back later this year. He's not expected to have surgery after the injury at Michigan, which knocked him out for the game. Here is Dan Lanning with an injury update yesterday's press conference on Tez and Marcus Harper.
As soon as they're ready to go, we'll have them out there. We're going to put player, safety first. Tez will be down, certainly right now in the near future, but I do anticipate us getting Tez back here soon.
So that was good news that Duck fans heard yesterday, that Tez is not out for the year with his shoulder.
Yeah, it's great news. I mean, you can survive the rest of the regular season likely without Tez Johnson. This, to me, is more of a long-term look of if you have to play Ohio State again in a Big Ten title game. He was massive in that win. He had a long touchdown catch. If you get into a situation where you're playing, whether you get a first-round bye or not, but you got a Texas, a Georgia, whoever you want to throw into that mix that you have to play in the playoffs, you want to be fully healthy on the outside. And so that's why it was big news. The last time Oregon played in a national championship game was 2014. Do you remember what happened to their number one receiver that year? Darren Carrington was the number one wide receiver. He had a explosive game against Florida State in the semifinals. He then, sometime between the semifinal and the national title, tested positive for weed, and he couldn't play in the national championship game. Does Oregon win the game? Probably not. They couldn't stop Ezekiel Elliott. But you know what helps?
Bigger concern.
Having your number one wide receiver would have been a nice leg up and not be with one hand tied behind your back.
I forgot about the weed incident with Carrington.
Remember that?
Thanks
that was 10 years ago. He got suspended for weed, man. Weed.
How many people were on the air in the country giving that kid crap while going home almost every
75% of them.
And eating or smoking weed.
Smoking a joint the second they sit on their back porch. This guy, come on, where's the morals? How could you do that? So, having him healthy and ready for the stretch run, this was awesome news for Duck fans. There was fear that this was going to be season-ending and his season was going to come to an end. Doesn't sound like that's the case. Awesome news yesterday.
Very interesting question asked to Lanning about if he should cover up the injury is kind of how I took the question. Of Tez Johnson because of what happened to Florida State.
Yeah, it wasn't necessarily specifically Tez. It was more about just like if anybody gets hurt in the next 3 weeks, are you not going to say anything because you're worried about losing your seeding because of what happened to Florida State?
But if they win the Big Ten,
it's an automatic bid.
That doesn't matter.
They can't leave you out of the playoffs.
I found that to be an odd question.
And Lanning had a pretty funny answer of like, I never tell you guys anything about injuries anyways.
Exactly.
I don't give you anything. So
we got to wait for Pete Thamel to give us the update.
That's not going to change, and I'm not going to just change it because it's the end of the year.
This one I found pretty comical because I jokingly text you when they scored that last touchdown. And I know you defended it to say the point differential, all that. Lanning is an a-hole. And I mean that in the best, most complimentary way. I like when coaches do this. I'm not one of these old fuddy-duddies. Respect the game, respect your opponent. No, they were at the 2-yard line. Run your goal line package. They don't want it to happen. Stop it.
Yeah, get it stopped.
Well, that touchdown put him over the Vegas number.
It did.
And Lanning, well, listen to Dan Lanning talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately they had a timeout. If they utilize the timeout, then there's the opportunity for them to stop it, and you're trying to assess, are they going to be in position to use one or not? And obviously, looking back at it, it's easy to say, okay, they probably weren't going to utilize one. They're going to let the clock tick out. But I'm not, at some point that could happen to us as well. It'll never be a shame for us going to score a touchdown. It's our job to stop them. And I know I've got a ton of respect for Coach Moore and the job that he's done. He's been amazing every time I've got to interact with him. And, you could feel bad, but as a competitor, you want to go out there and do the best you can to score. And I'm sure there certainly were some Oregon fans who were excited that we did there too.
He's been on with Isaac and Suk and talked about spread stuff before. This guy knows. He knows the number. I don't care what he says. He knows the number.
I think all these coaches do.
I do too.
I think they take pride in knowing that they can cover spreads. He's been pretty good at it this year. They're on a decent
stretch. Don't you want your name
stretch.
on that graphic? You're not thinking about this in the game, but you want them to show you pregame at the 50, and it says Dan Lanning somewhere, and then it says Dan Lanning 9-2 against the spread in the Big Ten.
I mean, the other thing that it has done, the two most interesting matchups in the new Big Ten conference are, for Oregon fan at least, is obviously Ohio State and Michigan. The way the Ohio State game ended, all the, did he slide in time, the pass interference, it just a classic game, right? That already became spicy. The Michigan game was lacking a little bit going in, ended up being a somewhat competitive game. You tack on that touchdown late, their fans are all living in the aftermath. You know what it did?
Spicy.
Made it a little spicy.
Well,
Next time you play
spice.
Michigan.
Yeah.
That's what you need. These are all new matchups. We're not used to them, and you got to start building that history. And so there's that point of it, too. The next time you play, Michigan's going to remember you did that if Sharon Moore's still the head coach, and that'll be a thing.
In listening to Lanning, my other takeaway from this with the Tez news, because I know Duck fan was excited to hear this, you don't want Tez to be hurt. You don't know how susceptible to re-injuring he is when he does come back. You worry about all these things with football, right? I think it just kind of highlighted to me, as somebody not wearing green and yellow, kind of what it's a representation of the season to a certain extent. There are other teams that have suffered massive injury, and Oregon's big injury, for a long time it was Bedford for us, but that doesn't matter anymore to people. It's now this. But go look at the schedule, and you hear this news, I'm like, everything has just kind of fallen exactly how they've needed it in the year. And even the other teams around college football, all of them, and maybe you can point to Oregon here too, but like all of the others, including the big boys, you can look at and say, I see your easy weakness. Carson Beck sucks. Texas, you got pushed around by Georgia. I think Oregon can also do that. You just we beat Ohio State. You can point at all of those teams. And I just look at Oregon and I say the schedule, the injury stuff, there's just something that has been kind of fallen in line to a certain extent so far in the season, and this was one of those other things.
Well, the other part of it last night, too, wasn't just Tez, although the Tez stuff was great to hear because that was the biggest concern. Harper, it sounds like he's going to be okay. Wouldn't commit to him playing this weekend. Don't expect him to, but he's going to be back, so he'll be fine. And then a couple other guys that we've been waiting on as fans, Gary Bryant, who's been out all year. Lanning said he expects him to play at some point this year. Jaleel Florence, who at times last year was your number 2 corner, opposite Kyrie Jackson. He's been out all year this year, and they're expecting him back at some point. I mentioned Dave Iuli last week, an offensive lineman who might end up getting the started guard this week if Harper can't go. Like, all of those things are also very encouraging because it's going to take everybody to win a national championship, and that's the goal this year.